Thank you. Thank you, everyone. First, I would like to thank you guys so much for the insights. It is definitely a growing market, and it's quite challenging. And maybe I can start by sharing a quick story. When Uber came to Egypt, to Cairo, I mean, I come from Egypt, from Cairo. There was another competitor. That competitor is originally from the UAE. But they have been there longer, I guess, and they understood the market way much better. Even the kind of offerings that they had was quite different from Uber. They were the first to introduce this scooter rides where you hop on behind someone from one point to the other. So yeah, and due to that, the competition was really tough. And at some point, Uber couldn't handle the competition. And guess what Uber did? Does anyone know? Can anyone guess? Sorry? They bought them, exactly. Exactly, and it was a big deal. I mean, of course, not in dollars, but in maybe local currencies. It was for around 3.1 or 3.2 billion dollars. That was a big deal, and now they can't even merge the brands, and there is a big topic around if they should merge the brands or not, because then Karim will lose the trust that they built in that time. And yeah, the biggest thing is definitely understanding the market, building the trust, offering different payment solutions. That's super tricky, like how to add balance to the wallet and stuff. That was, but yeah, thank you so much for the insightful talk. Well, today I'm going to talk about designing for chaos. Mainly speaking about how to build a design infrastructure in dynamic product environment where you have different product teams working on different goals or different OKRs or different features. This is where the chaos happen more or less. And why I think I'm okay to speak about this. Recently, I'm managing the product design team at AirHelp. And before that, I was leading the UX team at Vodafone in Egypt. And before that, I had my own design studio, Ingenuity Studio in Cairo. And I have a very long history in freelancing / consultancy / part-time jobs in many different companies and products. And in this very, I wouldn't say new topic, but currently, it's been trending for a while, and especially in the new setup of products in general. But before I get into that, let me have a sense of who do we have here. How many product designers are here? If you're a product designer, please raise your hand. All right. UX designer? All right. So in total, design, we have around, any other designers, graphic designers or others? Okay, so in total designers, we have around 50%, I guess. Design students? All right, yeah, okay, that makes it above 50%, definitely. Product? Oh, nice. One? Only one? Okay, tech, front-end engineers. Okay, so yeah. So quickly also before I start, can I know how many of you are actually working now on a design system or familiar with what the term design system is? All right, that's a little bit less than 40%, I guess. Okay, and can someone tell me what is the biggest challenge when it comes to building a design system in their company or in their product? Sorry? I didn't hear that. People. Okay. What about people?
Just trying to figure out what stakeholders want, and like when you have way more than one stakeholder, it's always tricky. It's usually not.
Okay. So yeah, resistance in general. Yeah. Okay. Any other problems when it comes to building a design system? Yeah, please.
Giving constraints, but also having autonomy.
I couldn't hear you. Giving constraints. Okay, where does the constraints come from?
The system.
The system itself?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're speaking that the design system can give constraints and limit the creativity of people. That's, okay. That's a very good point. Maybe from product point of view, you can share with me what can be a challenge.
I mean, I'm responsible for it, so it's fantastic.
All right, cool. So very good points, and that's why I want to start by first setting the mindset around the design system, and first ask ourselves a question as designers, as product designers especially, if it is valuable and impactful for the company I'm working in now, or for the product, to build a design system at this moment. And this is why basically it's quite challenging, like what was mentioned here, for example, that people, maybe they don't understand it, maybe people are thinking that it's a big exercise that is not worth doing at the moment. That's why as designers, we need to understand how the business is running and how the business, or where the business is at the moment. And this is why I want to start first by looking at the product lifecycle in general and look into what can possibly be the ideal time to build a design system in the product lifecycle. So this is the product lifecycle by Morgan Brown. It's very simple. In the beginning, you have the MVP, and then the minimal viable product, and then you explore the product market fit. Then you go into the growth phase, and then the company goes into the maturity phase, or the product goes into the maturity phase. Probably in the MVP phase, you are running on very low resources, whether tech or design. You're experimenting, you're still trying to figure out if your product is actually solving a problem. And at that moment, building the design system might not be the best or the smartest thing to do, because you should focus more on exploring new ideas, exploring your user's need, trying to really validate the problem that you are working on as a product. During the product market fit, probably there are some uncertainties that has been solved, so the product knows more or less where it's going. So maybe at the end of it, or when the company or the product is taking its shape for quite some time, then maybe you should consider building a design system, because after that immediately comes the growth phase, where you, as a company, you need to focus more on building and scaling. So the design system here might be very, very beneficial in terms of cost saving and improving the experience. And then if you are in the maturity phase and you don't have a design system, then probably you are in a big problem. So yeah, as I mentioned, in the MVP phase, it's too early. It's a very expensive exercise, and you probably want to put or to allocate your resources in a more impactful project. Between the product market fit and the growth phase, probably that's the ideal timing, because this is exactly when you need it. And then in the maturity, it's too late, it's too complicated, and it's going to be very painful and expensive. So yeah, maybe let's make it more specific. Let's have some tangible signs that your product actually needs a design system. It's first when you see repeating design patterns across your product, then definitely you should consider having at least some sort of a style guide. When you see longer time in shipping experiences that have more or less the same visual components, but it's taking long time or the same amount of time, definitely that's a lot of time wasted in rebuilding the same thing again. And if you are growing teams, product teams specifically, that require a product designer attached to that team. And what's the negative impact on the product? And here again, I want to set the mindset on the business impact of design in general. The negative impact of these things is, one, consistency, and consistency can impact the product negatively because inconsistent products are proven to be unreliable or untrustworthy by users. Long shipping time, it can impact the product negatively because of the cost that is invested, and a growing team can be a problem because then you have this lack of efficiency when it comes to communication. Okay, then sounds good. If you have these signs and you are in that period between product market fit and the growth, then yes, let's build a design system. But what is the biggest roadblock here? The biggest roadblock is that building a design system, if you look at it as a project, it will slow you down today in order to ship things faster or fast later. And why it slows you down? Because basically it disrupts the day-to-day business. So if you have already a design team working with different working with different product teams, then probably they are super busy working with the product managers and their squads on the project that they are assigned to, and normally they don't have enough time to work on such a task. And even also from tech point of view, they're also focusing with their squads on the work that they should do. So yeah, then this is the biggest problem that most of us face. Then where's the starting point in order to build a design system in this very dynamic environment? The first, or the starting point, is share, scan, and prepare. I will go into them in details. So in the beginning, you have to share the value of building a design system, and how can it be impactful, and how can it impact the business in a positive way. And again, more or less solving the problems that we spoke about in the beginning. First, the consistency, and again, the positive impact of consistency is that it drives more trust and reliability to the brand or to the product. Cost efficiency, of course, because you have reusable components library, so probably you will save a lot of time and a lot of effort. And from my experience, the minimum you will save is around 50% of the time to market, starting from design to development. Adopting change easily, and I've witnessed this a lot, especially when it comes to doing rebrand exercises or applying new visual elements. When you have this visual library repository, then one simple code change will impact the whole product in literally no time. And designing at scale. If you're growing design teams and you have more and more designers, then it's very easy for them to communicate with each other, and it's very easy for them to decide and focus on the UX side of things rather than debate which button is the right button to use, because they have this one single source of truth. So that's the first part, share the value of the design system. Communication is very important. Promoting the design system and promoting the project and the positive impact of it on the product is really, really important. The second part is scan and analyze your current visual assets. There is a lot of lessons to be learned from what you currently have. Even though it looks terrible from your point of view, even though it performs really bad, you can learn a lot from it, whether from the historical data that you already have, the analytics in general, or from any qualitative data that you can collect through running user tests or user interviews or surveys that can help you build the new system. And here we have 3 points I want to talk about. The first one, so normally when you do this kind of scan, people start to look at the product as pages or as screens. Don't do that, because in that way you will miss most of the in-between scenarios and the micro scenarios that might have more than what you see on a single screen. And that helps you with the coverage of your design system. The more you cover, the better your design system is going to be. So scan, looking at flows, don't look at separate screen. And make sure when you scan that you check the errors and the exceptions as well. Second point is research and test. Again, if you have a current product, look at the data, try to understand what's working, what's not working, what visual elements are performing well, what are not performing well. This will not only help you to identify problems and solve them on your new design assets, but also it will help you in the project management level, because then you can easily decide, okay, the visual elements or the visual assets with the low performance, then I can prioritize them, or the ones with high performance, I can deprioritize them. And last, conduct a visual audit. A visual audit is very simple. As a designer, you run this expert review, and you start putting your thoughts on each design element that you have or each visual element you have, so you can, when you make your decision later to improve a single component, you are aware of what you need to do. And here's an example from AirHelp, from the visual audit. So from our funnel. So here, more or less, is a list of, we use a software called Miro, and it's a whiteboard product, and definitely the board is way bigger than this. This is just a screenshot. And as you can see, we are highlighting what's wrong, what's good, and why, and different reviews on different product or different design elements. Last point, and that's the most important part of the project, because when you say the word design system, the first thing that comes into people's mind is that the tech part or the development part is the most difficult part, while actually preparing the design system and building the structure of the design system on papers is the most important part, because the design system is something that's built to scale things and to make things easier and to make things more efficient. So the intellectual effort is definitely more valuable than the executional or the operational level. So first, you group the common elements into buckets. So if you have buttons, even though that they are inconsistent, you put them together in one bucket. You have input fields, etc., 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 and then you understand what you have. And this exercise for me, yes, it sounds a little bit simple and sounds like no rocket science, but for me it's very important because it makes you realize what you actually need and where you should focus the most, rather than just copying, I don't know, Dropbox's design system where they have tons and tons and tons of components that might not be applicable to your product, and then you will just, for you, it will just be a waste of time. So doing this exercise, as much as simple as it sounds, it will definitely help you in being more efficient when it comes to building the design system. Second point, build the structure. Make sure that you understand what tokens do you have, what atoms do you have, and how, what's the depth of the design system is gonna look like. Last, make sure that you have a cross-check with product and tech to understand the complexity of the code and the complexity behind each component, and to what and here complexity in terms of changing this component or building fixing this component or this visual element. A very important tip here is make sure that you work closely also as a designer. Make sure that you work closely with the testing engineers, because they have a lot of knowledge about the error scenarios or the error flows, about the exceptional flows, and they probably have more knowledge that can help you cover the whole product as much as possible. Regarding the structure, I wanted to share the structure that we came up with at AirHelp. So as you can see on the first part, I mean, it's a little bit small, but anyways, the first part is the foundation. It has the layout, the fonts, the colors, etc. And then the design tokens, which has the attributes of the different styles, the shapes, the fills, the borders, etc., etc. And then the different elements. And here we went to only 2 levels of depth. Even though most of the design systems you will see like even deeper levels, but here we only decided to go with 2 because this is what we need. And here you can see different atoms, molecules, or organisms. And then comes, for me, the most important part. What happens after that is that what we call it crack the code. When you are building a design system, probably should be moving, yes. When you're building a design system, you're building something that should scale and something that should absorb and adapt to any case. And it's not only a matter of coverage, it's a matter of the anatomy of the different components that you are building. So always remember that you are designing, you are building a design system to design at scale. And here, the anatomy of each component is really important. Maybe I can explain it directly on one of the components that we built. So let's take a button as an example. So for a button, definitely you need the main styles, the primary styles, and then you have some secondary attributes to it, and then probably also you have the third level, which is the interaction. Defining this at the very beginning of the product, of building the design system, will definitely help you, one, as a designer, to understand what you're building and to what extent you can grow with this very small and simple component. And also, it can help front-end engineers building the components in a way that can be scalable later on with, of course, a lot of sophistication, but at the same time, in a simple way that they can understand it. And definitely you can imagine if you have such structure for each component ready from the beginning, naming the component will be easy, handing over the component will be easy, reusing the component later on will be easy, which will make things more and more efficient. Now that we talked about how more or less to look at each component on a micro level, let's have a look at the bigger level, then how to build. Normally, companies have two approaches, whether the Big Bang approach, where they work for a very long period of time on the design system, and then, bam, they release it. I've been there. Or you build it incrementally, and I've also been there. And let me tell you, you don't want to do the Big Bang approach at all. Why? So when we did, and that wasn't at AirHelp, when I was working in Vodafone, we released it on a Big Bang, with a Big Bang approach, because we had a brand relaunch at the same time. So we're like, okay, we will surprise the customers with everything that is new, including our design on the product level or on the digital products level. And the surprise was the next day, all of our numbers went down. NPS went down, all the conversion numbers went down, all the revenue numbers went down. And that's because, of course, people were shocked by what they saw. They couldn't find what they're looking for or what they're using on day-to-day basis. So it was, for them, it was like, okay, I'm really frustrated. Even though in major parts, the change was just visual, but still, people were used to things the way they are. So, and it took us like a really long time to readapt everything and to understand where things are not actually working, and then gain back stability on our numbers. The incremental approach really proved many times that it's really the best, especially if you are working with different product teams and you don't have a dedicated team for the design system. This is what I'm going to talk about today. So yeah, start small and build incrementally. But before you go there, again, if you are working in an environment where you have different product teams focusing on their goals, then probably you need to run some sort of a proof of concept before you go into the actual work of building the design system. And how do you build the proof of concept, or how we did it, at least at AirHelp, is that we picked 2 or 3 elements with different levels of complexity, and we created them, or we built them in a repository, and then we shipped them to the product. And this was done in a very small session, where it was just some sort of an experiment to see how things are actually working. And then, of course, you have the question, but why? Why do we need to have a proof of concept? A proof of concept can help you identify different tech and design challenges, because you will see in real life how challenging it is to build one component that works across the whole product, especially, again, if you have different product teams and probably you have different front-end technology stacks in general. Second is that you will have a real feeling of what is the actual effort that is needed to build and to ship components in the design system. And then you will validate the impact, because then you will see by yourself For example, building the component, how much time does it take? And distributing the component, how much time does it take? And then changing the component or the style of the component, how much time does it take? And you can compare it versus the traditional way that you can make it. Let me tell you, through all my experience, the numbers are always, always positive, even in the very simple form of a design system. Last thing is that it helps you, alongside with the tech engineers and the product managers, to set up the way forward and how you will move forward with the project, so you will have more visibility on how things will actually look like. Coming back to building incrementally, the way we did it at AirHelp is that also we didn't only build incrementally, we also separated building the design system from distributing the design system. And how did that work? So, as I mentioned in the beginning, we organized the structure. We made sure that everything is in place. We aligned with all of our key stakeholders as a design team. And then we designed the new components, the more structured ones, whether with new styles or whether with just small tweaks. Yeah. And then we shipped them into this new repository, and then we didn't force all the product teams to grab the components and to just ship the components directly to their squads. No, we actually asked them whenever they have enough time or when they have the capacity, they can easily just grab the components and implement them in the different teams. Definitely, many of you will ask, like, okay, what about the consistency? The product is inconsistent anyways at this stage. So having some minor inconsistencies here will be fine, especially that it's just a matter of time until you have the full product covered anyways. So yeah, and this is more or less how we separated building the components from distributing the components. One good aspect to it is that building the components requires like really, really minimal effort in this case, because we only had one engineer assigned on this project, which makes it very easy for him to communicate with the design team and build the components together and make sure that they have this quality of craft in each component. So what's next after building the design system? The first thing is to run redesign sprints, so you have some sort of timely intervals where you deliver more and more components and guarantee more and more coverage of your product. Test and validate the new components, definitely. You set up a governance model for the design system. You agree on how it's going to be updated. This is really important. How it's going to be updated, who's responsible for that, the structure of naming the different components, how it's going to be reflected between design and tech at the same time. And if you have enough budget, definitely build a design system team, even if it's just a small team of designers and researchers that can help keep the design system breathing all the time, not just an outdated set of visual styles. So, to sum it up, what we talked about today, in order to build a proper infrastructure for a design system in a dynamic product environment, one, you assess the value and the impact of the design system and you see if it's really worth it to do it now or not. Second, if the answer is yes, it's going to be impactful for my business, then you analyze and reform your current visual assets. You align with all of your key stakeholders, including product and tech. You create a scalable structure. Probably you want to run a POC to see how this structure is going to look like. And you build and distribute separately. Thank you, everyone. If you have questions,